Welcome, everyone. This is Libby Mucciaroni, Associate Director of Education, Technology, and Member Engagement at the Organic Trade Association. I'm so pleased to welcome you as the Organic Center presents today's webinar, Black Farmer Justice. A couple of housekeeping items before we start today's presentation. This webinar is being recorded. Any resources referenced today will be shared in the chat box. You'll be able to learn how to connect with each of our panelists today as well. In the next 2 business days, all registrants will receive a follow-up email which will include a link to register to view the recording on demand, as well as all the links that are talked about today. We hope that you are able to see that. Keep an eye out from it. It'll be from me directly. During registration, we ask that you let our presenters know if you had any questions on today's topic. With over 500 registrants, we are so thankful to have such a fantastic and engaged audience, and we received some really fascinating questions. Please know that your questions have been seen, reviewed, and considered as we have prepared for today's panel. For any questions or comments that you have throughout the webinar today, please take advantage and let us know what you want to say, what you'd like to ask through the questions pane on the platform. We'll be looking at that throughout the day as well. And finally, please know if you happen to have any technical issues, you can email me directly or you can message me through the questions panel as well, and I will be there to assist you. A little bit about the Organic Center. The Organic Center is a nonprofit research and education organization based out of Washington, D.C. They work to conduct and convene credible evidence-based science on the environmental and health effects of organic food and farming, and to communicate those findings to the public. The Organic Center's work is supported by companies and individuals who desire a sustainable and secure food system that promotes the health of humans and the environment. The Organic Trade Association is a membership-based organization for the organic industry. We ensure that all parts of the organic value chain have a strong voice in government and in our communities. We bring farmers, processors, distributors, retailers, and others together to promote and protect the growing organic sector. OTA represents its members to government on sector needs, market development and promotion, and strong organic standards and regulations. Members also receive the latest information and quick answers on organic regulations and standards in the United States and around the world. We're really thrilled to be joined by a dynamic group of panelists for today's panel on Black Farmer Justice. The panel discussion has been coordinated by Jason Porter, a PhD candidate of history at Northwestern University, where he's the Mellon Cluster Fellow in Latin American and Caribbean Studies. This fall, he's also served as the social justice intern at the Organic Center. And in 2019 and 2020, he was the Comexis Fulbright Garcia Robles Scholar. Jason, we are so delighted to have you here today. And with that, I'd like to hand the webinar off to you.
Thank you so much, Libby, for that amazing introduction. It's a true pleasure to be here with the Organic Center and with such a knowledgeable group of panelists here today to talk about Black farmer justice. I want to take a moment to think about an ongoing case of Black farmer injustice that is taking place just 60 miles south of where I am right now in Chicago, Illinois. The township of Pembroke, Illinois has for almost 100 years been a space where Black farmers who escaped injustices in the US South were able to take land that wasn't necessarily deemed arable and suitable for agriculture in the 1920s and 1930s. And they made it into not only a space to produce agriculture for their communities and Black communities in Chicago, but they also did it in such a way that they preserved the environment and the wildlife of that space. And now it's one of the most, it houses some 18, I believe, endangered species here in Illinois. And for that very reason, conservationists are trying to take their land and make it into a sanctuary for wildlife, even though they have preserved it, and their knowledge and their practices and their understanding of the land has preserved it in this way. That also the land is under conflict because a pipeline has been signed to bring natural gas through that land, which has undermined how those Black farmers are able to care for their families and care for the land. So I wanted to take a moment to think about an ongoing case right here, which really speaks to the fact that right now in this country, of the 3.4 million farmers, only 45,000 are Black. 100 years ago, there were 1 million Black farmers in the United States. And right now, we have an unprecedented moment where Black farmer justice has been brought to the federal conversation once again. And there's so many different spaces that we'll talk about a little today where grassroots activity is pushing Black farmer justice, both in rural and in urban settings. So with that, I'm going to give it off to Dr. Jessica Shade to introduce the panel a little bit more before it brings back to me and we get the panel started. But I just wanted to set that scene for how the panel is going to enrich us with their experiences and knowledge today. Thank you. Jessica, are you going to take over for a second? Or can I go right into introducing the panelists?
I think you can go right ahead, Susan. Yeah.
Sounds good. Sorry about that. All right, so first I'm going to introduce all 4 panelists and I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves before we get into the first set of questions. All right, so we have doctoral student in biology, Maya Allen. She's a doctoral student in New Mexico. And she's also the co-organizer of Black Botanist Week, which was a huge social media campaign that created digital space and real space for Black plant lovers around the country, really everywhere. I also also on the panel, we have Chef Laquanda Dobson. She's a chef and farmer activist. She develops curriculum for youth, connecting them to diasporic understandings of the past and the present moment. They are also a curator of spaces for Black women business owners. And she also is the culinary genius behind Chef Dobson's famous greens. We also have Ashley Gripper. She's a PhD candidate in environmental epidemiology, investigating connections between urban agriculture, mental health, spirituality, and collective agency. Like Laquanda, she is a Philadelphia-based farmer activist. And last on the panel, but especially not least, we have Tiona Williams, who is also a PhD candidate. And she works on U.S. environmental history using tools from political ecology, environmental justice, digital humanities, and African American history. And their already award-winning project focuses on the New Deal era Black Power movement, Black women agrarianism, and struggle for land reparations. I'll give them off to introduce themselves in a bit more detail before we give it back to me to start with the questions. Thank you guys again, all 4 of you, for being here with us today and just shedding your light and your energy and your experiences and your knowledge. It's such a true pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jason, for that awesome introduction and for the invitation to be here. And thank you to the Organic Center for hosting this event. Again, I'm Maya Allen, PhD student at the University of New Mexico in the Department of Biology. My dissertation examines plant colonization. So what are the mechanisms that plants use to establish in new areas? But in this space, my work is really centered on reclaiming and highlighting the legacy of Black botanists. And I've done that through the organizing with Black Botanist Week, but also looking at a particular case study of Blackdom, New Mexico, which was an all-Black town in the early 1900s that used agriculture for a mechanism of freedom. So thank you all. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Maya. Hey everyone, my name is Chef Dobson, aka Laquanda Dobson. I am a chef and a farmer. I've been farming for about 4 seasons now, and I've been cooking since the age of 12. Let's see. I'm also a member of the Black Dirt Farm Collective. We recently just bought land a few months ago, and we're still trying to work those things out. And I also run my own business called Curated by Chef Dobson, where I have many different events geared around the history of food and just connecting people with their ancestral crops.
Hey y'all, it's truly a blessing to be here. Jason, thank you for the invitation. My name again is Ashley. I'm the daughter of Dawn Kipkin and Paul Griffith III. I like to carry my parents with me wherever I go because they are the inspiration for the work that I do. Both of them transitioned from this world as a result of structural racism and food apartheid. So a lot of that influences and informs the way I approach the work. I think of it as happening for me in three different spaces: the academic space, the advocacy space, as well as the activist and grassroots space. So in my academic work, I'm at Harvard in the environmental health department, and my research looks at the impacts of agriculture on mental health, spirituality, and the collective agency of Black communities, specifically diving in Philly because that's where I'm from. So there's a lot of work around collective action, around organizing, around land access for Black folks. And I'm trying to highlight that in the academic space. In the advocacy space, I'm doing policy work with soil generation. So we are working with the city of Philadelphia to design Philly's first urban agriculture plan. And that is set to be released at the end of January. And this plan is different from any of the agriculture plans that we've seen in other cities because we are, one, it is a partnership, a collaboration between a grassroots organization and a planning firm. It's not just let's figure out what our community engagement strategy is. It's like, no, we're equal partners in this work. So we are really trying to design a plan that uplifts and is at the foundation is racial justice, economic justice, culture, sustainability, community building, and healing. And in the activist space, I run an organization, kind of like a little baby small business called Land-Based Johns. And we really are focused on the spiritual practices of our ancestors, inspired by Octavia Butler's Parable series, and offering education and workshops primarily to Black women on land-based living, agriculture, safety and self-defense, as well as carpentry. And all of this work is done with the focus on self and community healing. And we'll talk more about that through the questions. I think that's enough.
Thank you. Thank you. And Tiana, bring us home.
I was trying to unmute myself. Hello, everyone. I'm still learning GoToWebinar. I am technologically incapacitated, but I am so happy to be here among so many incredible panelists. I have to give shout out to Unita Blackwell, Annie Rankin, and Fannie Lou Hamer for delivering me into this work. I always see myself as carrying on their legacy. I am getting my PhD in history and African American studies at Yale. My dissertation looks at how rural Black women and rural Black feminists in particular are using their agricultural and ecological expertise and knowledge to get us free, and how those ideologies go on to shape both the civil rights and Black power movement. I'll leave it at that because I want us to be able to get into the conversation, but thank you all for being here as well.
Thank all four of you. That was awesome. So real quick, let me just jump into it. First question for everybody. In the past or the present, pick and choose depending on where you feel comfortable in your expertise. What injustices do Black communities or Black farmers face, and how do they respond?
Well, I'll kick this off. So Blackdom is part of the All Black Town movement. So I'll talk about that section of history. But so after the Civil War, in terms of injustices and stressors that Black communities were facing, is you had a lot of anti-Black violence. You have poverty, you have Jim Crow laws. So you have this restriction on your social and your economic mobility. And so the response to that is creating your own sovereign space. So you see the Black Town movement from like 1865 to the 1920s. And so Blackdom, that's one of those examples. And so they created their own sovereign space, and they had the explicit intention of having this community founded on agriculture. So that's when I said like agriculture was their mechanism of freedom, like that's what I meant by that. However, moving to New Mexico, you're coming, a lot of them were coming from some prairie grasslands, but a lot of people were coming from the south. So now you have climatic stressors like precipitation, temperature, soil quality. And so the other response that you see is that you have to innovate. And then so this story is particularly powerful because we're also going to be facing that with our climate change predictions, and we're going to have to innovate as well in order to maintain our livelihoods.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like Maya really like set us off. I think the only thing that I would sort of amplify in that is sort of the violence of it all, right? And so um, I've come across cases in the archive where this beautiful Black woman, June Washington, was actually forcibly institutionalized into what they called a mental asylum, just so her white neighbor could get access to her land. Fannie Lou Hamer opens her own autobiography talking about when she was 13, her family finally was able to get out of the sharecropping system, only to have most likely a white neighbor come in and poison all of their livestock, which put them in such an economic disadvantage. They ended up having to re-enter into the sharecropping system. And there's just so many stories of that. In Mississippi in particular, they created this livestock office, which was really like police officers sort of being used now to sort of like surveil Black landowners who were sort of getting involved in the civil rights movement. So there was just like all sorts of technologies and violences and policies and racism used to constantly try to like force African Americans and certainly indigenous peoples as well off of the land, and force them into sort of these constant cycles of poverty.
I can go next.
Absolutely.
Like Maya and Tiana already said, like for me, the things that pop up, the biggest issues and injustices that Black people, Black farmers in particular, currently face and have always faced in this country are racism and white violence. Y'all have beautifully illustrated examples of that. And it continues to this day. It looks a little different in terms of how we are experiencing racism, how we are experiencing violence. But I'll focus on, I want to focus a little bit on how we respond. And of course, I have to shout out my friend, mentor, Monica White, Dr. Monica White, who in her book on Freedom Farmers, it's called Freedom Farmers, the Black freedom, agricultural resistance in the Black freedom movement. And she articulates a theoretical framework for understanding how we respond. And that's through collective agency and community resilience. So as I'm starting to like unpack this more and more, and especially in an urban context, I'm thinking of like collective action, how we come together, how we organize, how we make decisions to address threats to our communities. Community care is a big one. So not only are we addressing the threats, the external threats, but we're also figuring out ways, new ways, old ways of caring for each other and supporting each other through all of the racism and violence thrown at us. And the last thing is resistance. So we're resisting, she describes agriculture as a type of constructive resistance, right? So we grow food as a way to feed ourselves and care for ourselves. We don't grow food because it's a trendy thing to do, because it's a hobby. We grow food quite literally for our own sovereignty, for our healing, and for self-determination among Black communities.
Chef Dobson or Maya, would you like to pick up on this, or should I go to the next question where it really ties into your experience and your work?
I'm ready for the next one.
Okay, okay. Well, thinking about the injustices and the responses that you guys just laid out, how would you want to address this question as it relates to your work in particular or your experiences?
Do I go first? I go first, or anyone?
You went first
Go
the
ahead,
last couple
Maya. Do
times
your
now. If
thing.
you
Do
want
your thing.
to, if you want to,
We just warming up over here. That's all.
take your time now.
Okay, so can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah. So you guys just laid out some of the injustices. So you in particular, Maya, you laid out the all-Black town movement from 1865 to 1920 and how Blackdom situated itself in that. And then you guys laid on some other history. How did the Black communities in your work in particular, how did they respond to those climactic stressors and those cultural racist stressors as well?
Okay, so for the climate, they had to, they basically, some are doing a trial and error type deal, right? Because you have to try and dryland farm in this new ecosystem because you're not having the same levels of precipitation like in the South. You're dependent on monsoon seasons where you get these pulses of rain during the summer months. And in New Mexico, those are very variable. And given our current climate predictions, it's only going to increase in variability. You may even have a delay of the summer monsoon. And so you have to learn the land because you're in a new place, but also draw on your knowledge system that you're coming to this new area with. And so I think if we're looking towards the future and thinking about how are we going to respond, one is that shared knowledge, right? Where we are either grassroots organizing and ensuring, right? Because we know that the USDA and some of these more institutionalized ways of passing innovations, technology, knowledge systems for farming have not reached our communities. And so we can do that, we can fill that. That would be very important under climate change. And then the other portion is that innovation, which time and time again, Black communities have demonstrated in making sure that you're bringing all of your diverse perspectives to resolving a problem. And most of all of those problems are tied to survival and quality of life.
Well, you had us in New Mexico right there. And I would ask a follow-up question about the access to water that they have, but I'm also like, Tiona, you want to take us to Mississippi with this? Tell us a little bit about Fannie.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, I don't have a science background, so mine will be more so looking at the qualitative. But I think the answer that came to mind in that was just like they took care of each other. They took care of each other. So there was this like powerful story I came across where this her name is Elizabeth Pitts. She's 12 years old when the first sort of tornado hits the Delta. Um, and she's sort of talking about the only reason why she survived, her family survived, is because they're like turning to their grandparents who have like been through all these other types of like so-called natural disasters and are telling them like we need to turn to the trees, we need to turn to the land to really build shelter and sort of protect ourselves and get ourselves through it. And sort of some knowledge she's sort of amplifying is just like listening and passing on down what comes from our elders, what comes from our ancestors, because they've already figured out how we sort of like survive the end of the world. They've done it 20,000 times over, and it really is just up to us to sort of listen. And so the easiest way I could say is just like we just show up for each other, we take care of each other, and we do what needs to be done for the collective community.
Well, you guys have tapped into science, you guys have tapped into history. I want to tap into personal experience, the grassroots, the down and the dirty. And for me, I think about just being in high school and my high school having a farm, and also a cooking program. And I think that those things are really important to, you know, spark interest into younger folks. You know, when we think about farming and things like that, we think about old McDonald's, you know, or just like a farm with like a hill and like a barn, you know, just like a picture like that. And I think that it is really important to see people like me, like y'all, who are like really out here growing food and like doing the science part of it, because it's not really something that you can think that you can make money off of, you know. And it's not about the money, it's really about the sovereignty of being able to take care of yourself and your future generations down. So yeah, I think I'm going to talk more and tap into the experience side of it throughout this whole webinar. I could say more, or we can move it on.
I mean, you can take us to the land right now if you would like to, Chef.
Well, you know, I also just think about, you know, I could go even further back and think about how my mom took us on nature walks so that we could go to sleep, and like picking up pine cones and stealing flowers, you know, just to give to my mom, you know, just stuff like that. And just remembering growing up that having food that you could grow for yourself did not seem like something that you could do. It seemed like out of reach, out of touch. And I think when I am working with the young folks, like, and Ashley also works with young folks, like just letting them know that we are teaching you these things so that you can teach other people so that you can survive. And I think that is the most important thing. And also honoring their great grandmoms, like, you know, about growing food. Like they don't see their family as farmers. My family is yet to see me as a farmer. And I'm gonna blast them if they on here, but they bought collard greens from the supermarket and didn't buy them from me. So family, if y'all on here, I had a bone to pick with y'all about that.
I want to stay on this what Tiona and Chef brought up, because I think the intergenerational part is really, really important to the work that we do. Especially in recognizing that, like, like I said, none of the stuff we doing is new. Like Tiona said, we get this from the people who came before us. They're the ones that's lifting us up to continue the work of caring for each other, resisting these structures, these oppressive structures that come for us. And I really, you know, I want to bring in my aunt to the conversation, my Aunt Joan. She passed away in 2008. But she was the first person that I ever seen like really growing some food. And I didn't, at the time I was 8 or 10 years old. And I just remember she had me out in the hot sun in Philly, in North Philly, in the backyard, like this like 8x10 backyard on the concrete with these tomatoes. And I was like, why am I in the dirt? Like I'm sweating, it's hot. Like I was just so irked. And you know, it wasn't until fast forward to 2020 when my own dad passed away, something about his transition and the grief that came with that opened up this memory that I had from when Aunt Joan first showed me about tomatoes, and I seen the peppers and stuff she was growing. And that also coincided with my sister Chef Laquanda inviting me to join her on the land to plant some stuff. And for me, that's the beginning of my farming journey. It really was I think a lot of us return to the land in search of healing that we need. A lot of times it stems from grief. A lot of times it stems from just like being in this system that does not want us to flourish. But for whatever the reason, I feel like the land calls us home, especially Black people, calls us home to receive the love and the healing and the gifts that she has to offer, but also it comes with the responsibility, right? So we're talking about Black farmer justice, and also a part of that to me is our responsibility to care for the earth, right? And it's not just it is like we are a big part of that, our healing and our well-being, and also we have to be thinking about the healing and the well-being of the planet, right? So that's just what I want to offer. for that question.
I appreciate that. Really quickly, I was trying to maneuver the chat so I could contact you guys individually and ask if you wanted to follow up in particular ways before we move on. I don't know how to do that and listen to you guys at the same time, and I want to stay present like the audience. So so forgive me if I'm fumbling through this. But before I move to the question about how environmental justice and injustice is gendered, and particularly the role of Black women in Black farmer justice issues, I wanted to just make sure everyone said what they wanted to say about their work in particular as it relates to Black farmer justice. Y'all we good to move on to the next question?
No, we not. I forgot.
No, I'm still
Okay.
rocking.
I'm
still rocking with what Ashley said. So
I forgot. You want to go,
and then
Chef?
bring it back.
You
No,
want to start, Chef?
I want you to finish your last thought, and then I'm gonna say what I had to say because you was like,
Is everybody else good? Tiona, Maya, you guys? Okay. You guys go.
I'm
All
just
right, current
enjoying
issues
the
facing our
farmers
community.
talk.
Oh, sorry.
I would say I'm just enjoying hearing the farmers talk. Like, y'all go off. Woo!
We're talking about farmers with issues that we're facing. Is like land is a huge one. Like land, like Black people being able to have land security and access land. So like, how do we get land, and then how do we keep land? Like in my own family, we in this whole heirs property thing, right? We found out we got land in Georgia. Well, they've been knowing. I just found out we got land in Georgia. And it's tied up in these mechanisms that are designed to have our land stolen from out under us. And it's the same thing that's happening in Philadelphia. This is huge land security, land access issues for Black farmers, for all farmers, for real. And it looks different now. The way it looks in Philly is now gentrification is what's contributing to people not being able to access land, because city council is more likely to support developers and give land to developers than they are to community organizers and people doing the work on the ground. So I really want to bring up this issue of land, Black land theft, and land access as central to one of the issues facing Black farmers. You know, and you talked about Pembroke in the beginning, like people came and reclaimed this land and like revitalized the soil, like brought help to bring life and organic matter to the soil, and now it's being co-opted by white conservationists and environmentalists. And it's the same, like it's the same story, just packaged a little differently in all of these different communities across the South, North, Midwest, West Coast, everywhere. And I think that's something that we need to start to address, especially as organizations who hold power, nonprofit organizations like the Nature Conservancy, because that's the, you know, one of the primary drivers in this issue with Pembroke. Those organizations are all over the place, and they're doing it at different scales in different communities. So, you know, I want to encourage anybody listening to this call to figure out how you can support the Black people retaining land, Black people being able to flourish and develop self-determined communities, and what role you have in challenging some of these institutions that continue to take land from us.
Can't hear you, Chef.
What about now?
I can, yes.
Yeah, I had to take a deep breath on that one. You said Black land theft, and I was like, whoa, I ain't heard that one before, you know, but it hit me it hit me to the core. And I think it's important for me to bring up, like, yes, like we want people to give us land. But another question that I am like struggling with right now is the fact of like, how can we keep land? You know, like, yeah, we're all probably in our 30s, you know, in our late 20s, but we not gonna be able to keep the land that we need and that we want unless we are going back and we are talking to the younger generations about this. And I think one of the things that I always have a problem with younger folks who are like getting introduced to the land, there are so many things that they have in their minds that farming is connected to slavery, you know, and the work that I'm doing is to make sure that we are breaking the past history of that. Like, we are a part of the land. We have been stewarding the land since before, you know. Our ancestors were, how do I say this? My ancestors, our ancestors were basically, you know, people were looking for this type of farming expertise. You know, we came here with that knowledge already. And then just like, you know, teaching our young folks about that history, not connecting it with slavery times and letting them know that, yo, you are actually free. You are free to grow and to do whatever you need to do to survive out here, you know. And there's so many stories when it comes to like seeds, how certain seeds won't even come up unless you are planting them how they were planted way back. And it's all about storytelling. I think about this rice that I've been trying to grow for 2 years now. And the history of this rice is that it came here from Trinidad, and now it's in Philadelphia. And many farmers in Philadelphia are trying to like grow this rice. And the story behind this rice is that it wouldn't grow because our enslaved ancestors got hold of the seed and they were growing it for themselves. And they were growing this one rice in particular, and it didn't need a lot of water. You know, this rice actually grows on dry land. Okay, you don't need a lot of water to grow it. So they were having problems with getting this rice to come up on this one particular land. And it took for one white man and one black man to pray together and to say that, yo, you this land that you are on, and the black farmer that is here is free, you know. So please come up. Like, we need your food. We need your fruits of your labor, you know. And then the next year this rice is coming up, and then this year, you know, I'm growing it and I get a whole row of this rice, almost enough to like feed about 6 people, you know. And since now that I know this story of this rice, you know, and I'm sharing it with y'all, like, seeds, I don't know how we got here, but wow, seeds are powerful. And I just wanted to share that with y'all, that we need to continue to tell the younger generation about this stuff that we're doing. And yeah, we know slavery happened, you know, I honor to that, but there's more life.
I really appreciate that comment, Chef, because I think these intergenerational storytelling moments are so important. Really quickly, since you guys brought family into the conversation, my grandmother, Dolores Scott, is in North Philly right now. She comes from farmland from Snow Hill, Maryland, and she actually used growing up on the farm to actually join the Nation of Islam and become an activist in Philly for generations. And I mean, I could go on and on about my nana, but yeah, it's really been. I don't throw stuff out there information wise unless she vets it first, you know. And I really, you know, she's always giving me really good feedback, because I think memory is really important. But I think that also transitions to the next question about, particularly, I study Latin America, and in a lot of Black spaces and Afro-Indigenous spaces in Latin America, activists face a lot of harm, and in particular, women face a lot of that harm, particularly because they're on the front lines, getting water, raising food, organizing themselves. So the scholars and journalists have argued that environmental justice is gendered, and environmental injustice is gendered as well. That being said, I was wondering, panelists, your thoughts on in particular the role of Black women and Black farming in the past, but then also Black farming in now and in the future as well, and how that those roles are gendered. They don't have to focus on women, and if you want to talk about gendered nature of it more broadly. Don't make Maya go first again, y'all.
You're still on mute, Tiona.
I don't want y'all to hear my dog in the background, so I keep muting myself and forgetting to unmute. Apologies. I was gonna say I could go ahead and get us started. I think I was thinking of several things when you posed this question. One, kind of what you said, that Black women, Indigenous women are sort of on these front line of environmental, climate, and food justice movements. And I think something that I'm coming to terms with in my own research is even how that sort of plays out along like reproductive justice lines as well. So I'm studying how in the 1920s, the Mississippi State Department of Health starts executing all of these like research studies on the quote unquote Negro diet, trying to see like how do they make sure that there's enough Black labor to now be exploited on these plantations. And then by like the 1970s, and shout out for Dorothy Roberts' incredible work on this, that sort of like desire to sort of like help Black women continue to be able to reproduce quote unquote healthy babies now sort of turns into this forced sterilization movement. And now you're saying that they're producing too many Black people, and now we have to sort of find different ways for like population control. So I've been thinking a lot about like how even Fannie Lou Hamer herself was forcibly sterilized, and so as she's sort of like dreaming of the Freedom Farm Cooperative, I feel like it has such a holistic sort of like role where she even gets into like Black women's reproductive health. And so because she's like really seeing these like interconnections between agriculture, reproductive justice and rights, ending the violence against like Black women. And so that was just sort of the thoughts I had when thinking of that question.
You want to go, Maya? Okay. I just have a quick comment. I like that you acknowledge that across the world, Black women in particular, are largely the laborers in agricultural like nations. And as I think about the women that I know who do this work, the Black women who do this work, I come to the realization that Black women are the caretakers of our movements. And Black women also need to be the caretakers of themselves, of ourselves. So a lot of times, because so many of us are nurturers, we pour and pour and pour into the work that we do. And in working with people, we don't always receive what we need to be cared for, right? So I think that it's important for us to also remember to step back and care for ourselves and care for each other as we do this work, because we drive these movements. I love that Tiona keep bringing up Mama Fannie Lou Hamer. She is such an inspiration to so many of us who are farmers, who are growers, who are organizing collectively and cooperatively. And I just want to encourage everyone who is a Black woman doing this work to remember to care for yourself, make sure that because we can't continue to sacrifice our well-being, because we are our most powerful and impactful selves when we are rested, when we are held, and we are healed. So that's just what I want to say on the gender question.
Any final comments? All right. I would personally like to say that I've been inspired by Maya's Black botanist movement on social media. I would highly suggest follow that. I mean, just that is definitely a space where Black women have just really just shown and are teaching and expressing themselves. It's a sight to behold. I've learned a lot from it. Generally, I'm gonna combine the next questions so we transition into audience questions at the end. So I'm gonna ask the question about accountability and the question about organic farming together. So how is organic farming as movement more generally something that supports Black farmers, and then also how can it improve? But then tag to that generally, how can we think more broadly about accountability and accessibility as people invested in these issues, but also facing these as well? This will be the last question coming from me before we open it up to the audience. I hope this transitions into that as well. Thank you.
If y'all don't mind, I'll start this one off. Just quick things. Coming from a community standpoint, the word organic in my community is looked at as like a price, not really on like a health type of standpoint. And it also means like outer reach. And I know that depending on where you are financially, you will definitely get the non-organic item first. And I think what's really important is to honor the people who are doing natural agriculture, because even though you don't go through like all of these different points to get certified as organic, natural agriculture or farming is no pesticides or anything involved. And we've been planting like this since forever. Our great grandmoms, planted tomatoes and things like that without pesticides. So I think that the word organic does not gear towards my people. And yeah, I'll stop right there.
Chef, you put that perfectly. I was trying to think, how do I say this? Yeah, I think organic farming has always been in us. And because of our strategies when we do farming, I don't buy anything organic because I'm not paying $3 for a head of broccoli. The only organic thing that I eat is from my own garden. But organic, I think there's a disconnect there. That label doesn't have the same, from my perspective, it doesn't mean the same thing because it's tied to this financial thing. And then the default is actually natural farming rather than using these big monocultures or pesticides and fertilizers. How organic farming supports Black communities is the fact that you're reducing that fertilizer use, so you're not impacting your nitrogen cycle. Who are the communities that are most at risk when we disrupt these fluxes in our system? It's Black communities. So you really need the people that are over fertilizing, using a bunch of pesticides to stop doing that because they're directly harming our communities. The second question about accountability and accessibility, just to reiterate what everyone's already said, I think that accessibility piece comes from being self-supported, and we are going to be the drivers of that. Accountability, I think that we have to just show up at City Council, electing legislatures that are going to support the Justice for Black Farmers Act and being very vocal, because at the end of the day, communities of color are going to be disproportionately affected by what we're doing. So I think that accountability also just has to be come from being fervent and being loud and being vocal.
Can you say the question one more time? The
Yeah.
accessibility, accountability one?
Yeah, I will read it off really quickly. Yes. How can we center accountability and accessibility in matters of Black land, food sovereignty, and environmental justice?
Who is the we?
I'm asking you as the panelist. But if you want,
okay.
um,
Because I think everyone can be practicing Sankofa, which is the name of the farm that Laquanda and I work at, means go back and get it, learn about your history, you know, understand the past and where you come from and how that influences the present and also how it influences how you move forward. For Black people, a lot of that is reclaiming those agricultural traditions, retaining those practices that our ancestors have done for tens of thousands of years. So, you know, we talk about organic, and all of us on this call know that we've been doing natural agriculture, we've been doing permaculture, we've been doing all the little trendy hip names for this stuff for forever. This is the reason that we were forcibly brought from Africa, from the continent over here, is because of the agricultural knowledge that we had. But for everybody else, for white people in particular, I think also understanding your history and your past and how you came to this land that is indigenous land, and how your ancestors got here. And that's, you know, I say that for better or for worse, because I think when we talk about accountability and we talk about accessibility, everybody want to walk around here like they ain't benefiting from white privilege, or they don't. I mean, my ancestors were not slave owners. Just learn about your history and allow that to inform, you know, your position and how you see yourself. And then when you occupy positions of power and positions of privilege, you need to figure out how you're leveraging those positions and redirecting resources into the communities that were deprived of them. So that's kind of how I think about the accessibility and accountability piece. And I also want to highlight this tweet I saw the other day. I can't remember exactly what it said, but basically it was saying, you know, everybody want to talk about how we center marginalized voices. How about we move out the way so we're not the ones doing the centering? So for me, what accessibility and accountability looks like is literally sometimes as an academic, stepping out of the way and figuring out, okay, not even figuring out, being in direct communication and conversation with people on the ground about, okay, how can this role that I occupy be useful to you in this movement to get us free? And then operating from that standpoint, as opposed to being like, here's my research questions, here's what I'm gonna study, because I think this is the way that this thing is working. No, that's not it.
Thank you guys so much for those responses. I have two audience questions rather, that I'm going to ask it at once, unless there are any final comments on the last question that you'd like to answer. Did everyone get to answer that to the best of their, any final comments on that one? Okay, cool. So you guys have mentioned a lot about like memory and education and the youth. One question was what is needed to support young Black farmers in the United States? And I think that also thinks about, I think we can think about kind of like education as well. And then the other question I want to tag on with that, it's a little different, so feel free to answer one or the other or both. What are ways to understand the overlap between agricultural justice and resistance to capitalism and monopolies? So I think we think a lot about scales. We talked a little about organic functions on a very, very large scale. You know, you think about, you know, the food justice label that, you know, for instance, I believe it's like Soul Fire Farm has. I don't believe they farm organic, and I don't believe you have to be organic to have like a food justice label, for instance, right? So there are some variants among those. So yeah, so those two questions, youth, and then also about scale and what's the relationship between agricultural justice and kind of like capitalism. I'm sorry if those questions were so different. It was hard to tackle them. We can focus on the youth first, you guys.
I'll comment a little bit on the youth aspect. I think it is important to pay young folks to farm, to learn about science and history in reference to this work. You know, farming is everything that all of us is doing. Yeah, and I would say new farmers going in, I think your first 2 years, you should get farmware. You should get equipment. Do you know how much a pair of Carhartts are? They're like $100 a pair, you know? And if you're really into this work, you should have 5 pairs of Carhartts to wear every day, you know? Stable boots, so that you aren't hurting your back. You aren't doing these types of things, or making sure that everyone has pruners. Yo, pruners, they are very useful, and everyone has a knife. So I would say that it is really important for the first 2 years of a new farmer, no matter the age or whatever, that they have funding for 2 years on official wear.
Any final comments? I think we have a couple more minutes.
On the youth aspect, I think what I've learned from working with youth the past 10 years is to be myself, and be honest about my own experience, because it's resonated and connected with young folks in ways that I didn't anticipate. And young folks can suss out when you being fake, or when you putting on a mask, or like a different face to like try to get, and I just have had the greatest relationships from being myself, you know, and being honest about like where I come from, my background, and how I even got into this work. I'm thinking in particular about this session that Chef and I did, was it last year or earlier this year, with the kids at Fells High School. Yeah, and both of us, we met to figure out how we was gonna approach it, and we was like, let's just be our Philly Johns, and we called it Two Philly Johns Farming on the Land. You know what I'm saying? So that kind of thing I think is really important for engaging young folks, and trying to like help pass on the knowledge and wisdom that we've learned through doing this work.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna try the capitalism question. So to support our food system, you need to grow as many plants as possible, as cheap as possible. So then you have reliance on fertilizer, you have reliance on pesticides, all these things. People won't eat food that doesn't look perfect in the grocery stores. You have food waste. And so I think thinking at these larger scales is you have a lot of things that you need to combat. One, you need funding for technologies that makes it easy to grow cheap food that doesn't harm the ecosystem. You need to combat all of the people who are already getting a bunch of money because they're selling fertilizers or whatever. And then you have a lot to do there. And so I think that is going to require a cultural shift in America, where it's the people who say this is not acceptable because of the consequences and because of who suffers. And I think that all comes back to community organizing and how you raise your children, etc.
Thank you so much for that final comment, Maya, bringing us here to our conclusion. I would like to again thank Chef, Ashley, Tiona, Maya for your time and your insight here today. It's a true pleasure to share this space with you all. And I'm going to pass it on to Libby to close us our panel webinar today. But just lastly, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you to each and every one of you. It's been such an important conversation, inspiring. The responses, some of which I think you've seen, and many that you haven't quite yet, have just been outstanding. Folks are really appreciative of the conversation today and have so many more questions. And I know that the conversation is just beginning in the industry here today. I know there's another webinar just in a few minutes that another organization, OFA and NOC, are running as well. But I want to thank all of you today for your time in a very busy season for each and every one of you right now. I've shared on screen contact information for each of our panelist members and for Jason as well. That will also all be included over email when we send out the recording, just letting everyone know it's in the chat, it's on the screen as well, but don't worry, we'll send out that information and make it more accessible later. You can learn about each and every one of them so much more, get connected, ask more questions of them personally. To the over 230 people that have joined us here today, thank you so much for being here as well. I'd like to remind you to check out the Organic Center's website. You can see science education opportunities, including their full on-demand library of webinars. Thanks to Ashley, Jason, Chef Laquanda, Maya, Tiona, for your just really brilliant discussion today. We really appreciate both your time and your commitment to this work, and for the hours that you've invested in your life so far and the hours in the future as well. As a reminder, a link to view the recording for everyone in attendance today and all of you who are not able to attend will be available, as well as the links as I mentioned that all will be sent out to registrants within the next 2 business days. On behalf of the staff and the members of the Organic Trade Association and the Organic Center, we hope to have you join us at future educational opportunities. Please have a wonderful day, a wonderful holiday season, and we'll see you in 2022 at Future Education. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.